Welcome to my video on my second model. This time I'll be showing you how I painted and weathered the Churchill Mk.III AVRE from AFV Club. AVRE stands for Armoured Vehicle Royal Engineers. I added a few details to the model during building, such as some etched tie downs to the turret, made two new air covers from plastic card to the air intakes on each side of the vehicle, added some etched chains to the towing eyes, used fishing lead wire to add electrical cable to the side lights, bolts were added to the glasses, wing nuts added to the jack blocks, and some filler added to the model and then sanded smooth. Struts to the exhaust were made from some spare etched parts I had in my spares box, and green stuff putty was used to make the tarpaulins on the side of the turret and on the rear deck, along with some aftermarket cam net. Here I am pointing out the air covers again for some unknown reason, because I've already told you about it. I lost the retaining clasp on the other crew hatch, so I had to make that from scrap. The flat cupola was used on this model, as this was a normal feature of wartime AVREs, and also made new periscope covers from some plastic card. I added some etch rod to the aerial mount, more etch chain to where the towing eyes would be fixed. The rear panel on the left hand side was removed just to add a point of interest. After washing the model in some detergent, which helps remove any dust from the construction process, and then when dry I gave the vehicle a coat of car primer. I prime my models as it serves two purposes. It gives any etch I've used a coat of paint so I can then paint over, and it also shows up any flaws that may need attention. Now it's time to add some colour. I like to give a pre-shade to my models as I believe it adds a depth and a texture to the following painting colours. For this I used Vallejo's Model Camouflage Black Green. Painted this into all the panel lines and other areas that I think may be in shadow. Now for the base coat. I used olive drab for this, which is a US colour, but after all of the future weathering processes it won't be noticeable. This was sprayed between all the shadow lines and helped start the highlighting process. To highlight areas even more, I added some duckhead green to the olive drab base coat and applied this to the panels. Now that all the panels had been picked out in this colour, here you can see the various shades and tones. I now wanted to add a little bit more colour, just to get away from the monotonous green of some of the British vehicles. So for this I used Cam Light Green from Mk.III and gave it a mist all over the vehicle before moving on to the next stage. Vallejo's London Grey and Off-White were now mixed together and the exhaust painted. This gives a good base coat for the following tones and weathering later on. Vallejo's brown violet and black were now mixed together, and the fire extinguishers were painted each side of the turret using a slightly darker mixed shade for the top of the bottle. Brown violet, buff and off-white were now mixed together to produce different shades, and parts of the vehicle were picked out in these colours, such as the struts along each side, periscopes the rear of the exhaust shroud or cover, water or fuel cans on the rear right of the vehicle. The commander station and cupola, bolts and the many wheels along the side of the hull. I also use these colours to add some light along the edges of the vehicle, such as here around the turret, and then blended with some clean water. Again, blending. Keep the brush moving so you don't get any tide marks when the acrylic dries. It was now time to add a filter. For this I used oils such as olive green, sap green, yellow ochre and white. I dotted these all over the vehicle and then with a flat brush dampened in some clean thinners, brushed this into the vehicle in straight lines, working it into the paint just to make it look like it had faded and again to add more variation in tone to the base green colour. Once these had all dried, it was now time to give the model a coat of varnish to seal everything in. And it also helps with the following stages such as the washes, etc. I used some Humbrol clear gloss coat. This doesn't need to be thinned and I applied it in a very thin layer over the model. A couple of hours later I gave it another coat. I now use some acrylic varnish and using a brush applied this to where the decals will go onto the front of the vehicle, the turret, and I also painted it onto the tracks as the primer had started flaking off the vinyl. Now to add the decals. To do this I use some Tamiya Mk.III decal fix. Brush this onto where the decal is to go. After removing the decal from some warm water, dab it on some paper towel to remove any moisture, then apply the decal. Use a cotton bud to remove any more water that's trapped underneath. You can also use the cotton bud to press the decal in place. Here I'm adding the lettering to an ammo box I put on the rear deck, as for some unknown reason I had fixed a spare bogey here, so it was removed and replaced with this ammo box, which had been painted in Vallejo burnt umber. Once the decals are dry, I then add some acrylic varnish just to seal them. Now that the varnish is dry, it's time to add a wash. For this model I use some dark brown wash for green vehicles by MkIII. Adding a wash can help give depth to the parts of the model and adds a bit more life to it. I first put some of the wash into a small palette along with some clean thinner. This way I can vary the strength of the wash when applying it to the model. Make sure it flows around all the detail and into any recesses. After letting the wash dry for about 5 to 10 minutes, I get a clean soft brush, some clean thinner and blend away any wash that's unwanted around any areas that you don't want it to be seen. Once all of the unwanted wash has been cleaned up with enamel thinners, the model has to be set aside for about 24 hours to dry before the next stage of the effects can be added. You'll see these in the next video. Thanks for watching. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe. It really is free. All the best, Matt.